come November, we said, not this year. That was a tough decision for us to make. As I'm sure you share, and certainly the core team felt very strongly, a sense of urgency around this issue. But we also want to be smart about moving forward with this. Why no go? The easy answer is that we had no line on that money. But really the more correct answer is that we did not have some of the key allies we needed. Some of the key organizations that, if they're not in your corner, who's going to be in your corner on this issue? I'm running out of time, so I'm going to jump a little bit. We can talk more about that maybe in question, Q&A. I'm going to skip over some of the other good questions that we wrestled with. Well, let me just mention quickly. Can Jim McDermott yield me any time? No.
Especially because it's not Jim. It's me.
Oh, am I eating into your time?
Yeah.
Okay, well then I will progress. What is next for Carbon Washington? I think that that's not something that I can answer, but I think that the people in this room can play a big role in that answer. Here's what I believe about the situation on the ground. We have an amazing opportunity. And we have an amazing opportunity here because this is an issue of staggering importance. We know that. And a lot of the people out there know that too. And that gives us the opportunity to run a completely different kind of campaign. A campaign that connects to the grassroots and engages the grassroots on a scale that is rarely seen. So I want to go back to some of Patrick's point of view, because I think that there's a different way to look at some of the statistics that we see. This is the depressing graph that you see all the time, which seems to tell you that people care more about gas prices than about the habitability of the planet that we live on. But I don't believe that that's what this graph tells us. This graph tells us that when you push people into a now frame of mind, they care about gas prices more. There's recent data that shows that when you push people into a future frame of mind, this is an open-ended question, with not a multiple choice question, an open-ended question. This is an amazing result here. The number one unprompted answer that people give for their concerns for the future is global warming and the global environment. That's pretty amazing. So we have an opportunity, and I hope that everyone in this room will stay involved with Carbon Washington and help us move forward with that. Thank you.
Sorry, cut them off. Okay, and finally, it's my joy to introduce you to Lisa Fitzhugh. She's a creativity catalyst and founder and former executive director of Arts Corps. Thank you, Lisa, for coming today.
The only reason I started myself is because I thought, oh wow, everyone thinks Jim's speaking, and actually it's just me. So if we have more questions, I want to leave them open for questions about your thing, because I actually have a few myself. So I'm going to take us on a little bit of a tangent. I'm not going to talk about carbon pricing at all. At all. I'm going to talk about change and how change happens. And I think the organizers asked me to speak today because I am going to bring a very different perspective. And I think hopefully it will bend your mind enough around such that some super powerful creativity can come forward at Aqua Verde this afternoon to figure out some solutions for the next steps on this one. It's interesting that they asked me to speak instead of Jim, because actually Jim has been in Congress for exactly the same number of decades since I graduated from college in 1989. He started in Congress in 89, and I left college in 89. And I think that I have had very different experience than 2 decades in Congress. But what we share is an incredible passion to facilitate change. I spent the first decade after college in and out of politics. Sometimes on the inside, staffing elected, sometimes on the outside as a consultant. I developed the most substantive knowledge in the environmental policy, in the environmental world. In fact, my last job was with Mayor Paul Schell as his environmental aide. And I got really tired of the exclusiveness of politics. It felt like an insider game, and it felt like there was a real lack of connection to real people's lives. I got tired of sitting in rooms talking about how we should make policy around other people, and those people were not there. I got pretty cynical, and I lost sort of the faith in politics' ability to make change, the kind of change that I wanted to be part of. And like Casey Golden explains, we've been talking about oil dependence for 11 presidents. That's a long time to wait around to be talking about something and not to change. So I left that world behind, and I started my own nonprofit in perhaps the most marginalized field in the sector, arts education. From somewhere in my unconscious, I envisioned a program that hired paid teaching artists in all art forms to facilitate creativity in young people in and out of school, prioritizing low-income communities. It was conceived as a stopgap for what was missing in K-12. I focused on education because I feel it all starts there. Right? It's the place from which future change will be born. And I went to grassroots because I wanted to get closer to what was real. And after a decade of the nonprofit experience, I left thinking I might be closer, just that much closer to knowing what it took to make change, but I still wasn't there. For 10 years, essentially, since I ran ArtScore, we documented, researched, analyzed creativity. How it was, how it happens, where it comes from, what it produces, what its potential is. And I use this knowledge today as a foundation for the work I do through Creative Ground to facilitate creative practice for transformation in individuals and organizations. The nonprofit program I started, by the way, was ArtScore, and I left it 2 years ago. It's thriving, interestingly, in spite of this economic situation. JP Morgan Chase just gave it a grant for $500,000 over 2 years. Unheard of 10 years ago when I started the program, for a program in arts education to get $500,000. And to one of my old bosses, a local politician, who told me when I started ArtScore that my idea for it was naive, I say, well, yeah, it's changing people's lives and the communities around them, and if that's naive, then naive is a good thing. If I had more time, I would tell you exactly what I learned over a decade watching creativity happen, but I'm going to just mention a few highlights, and these are really important for understanding where creativity comes from. First of all of the research and all of the observations confirm that creativity is innate in all of us. It's not something that some people have and some people don't. Second, creativity is a set of habits of mind. Cognitive and non-cognitive habits of mind are processes that we can develop, strengthen, and apply to ourselves or to situations outside of us. Courage is identified as the most important practice or habit. Third, creativity is fuel for transformation. It's what is required for massive change. If we want things to change, creativity is the fuel. And fourth, and probably the most profound, creativity is how we gain perspective, how we get beyond the trees and into the forest, how we get the 30,000-foot view, which we're missing often a lot in some of these, when I hear the polling stuff about what people are thinking about, we're thinking about the trees, not the forest. Which brings me back to the concept of change. So reflecting back on these chapters of my career, I definitely perceive movements, change, social change, politics in a very different way than I did when I was writing letters for Congressman Carbon in the late 80s.